You know that feeling when you're flipping through old TV memories and something just hits different? Like, there are shows you watched, and then there are shows that lived in your house. The Rockford Files was the second kind. From 1974 to 1980, Jim Rockford and his beat-up Pontiac Firebird basically owned Friday nights. And James Garner made it look so effortless, you almost didn't notice how good it actually was. Almost. Because behind the scenes, there were casting shakeups, network fights, real mob consultants, and at least one fact that'll make you go, wait, seriously? Today, we're counting down 21 weird facts you didn't know about the Rockford Files. Number 21, the answering machine was basically accidental television history. So here's a thing nobody talks about enough. Every single episode of the Rockford Files opened with a message playing on Jim's answering machine, some caller dodging a bill, pitching a scheme, canceling plans. It seems like a cute little gimmick now, but in 1974, answering machines were barely a thing most people owned. The show accidentally made them feel normal, even aspirational. Viewers started associating the technology with this cool, unbothered private detective. Some cultural historians have actually pointed to Rockford as one of the small reasons answering machines entered mainstream American households as fast as they did. Which, honestly, is a wild legacy for a 30-second cold open bit. Number 20, James Garner was the studio's second choice by a long shot. Here's where it gets interesting. When producer Roy Huggins and Universal started developing the character, their first instinct wasn't Garner at all. Several names were floated, including some bigger action hero types who probably would have turned Jim Rockford into a completely different animal, tougher, less funny, more punchy. Garner only came into serious consideration after those conversations stalled. And here's the thing, Garner himself almost said no, because he'd already done the whole TV cowboy thing with Maverick and wasn't sure he wanted another long-running series commitment. He almost walked. The fact that he didn't is basically the reason the show exists as we know it. Number 19, his trailer wasn't just a character detail, it was a statement. Jim Rockford living in a trailer on a Malibu beach? That wasn't random set dressing. The creative team made a very deliberate choice to put their private detective not in a sleek downtown office, not in a penthouse, not anywhere that suggested glamour or success. He was behind on rent, driving an aging car, and scraping by on $200 a day plus expenses when he could even collect. It was a direct pushback against the clean, infallible detective archetype. The show wanted him to feel real, lived in. And that trailer became one of the most iconic homes in television history because of exactly how unglamorous it was. Number 18, the theme song almost didn't have that guitar riff. Mike Post wrote the theme, and if you're hearing it in your head right now, you're welcome. But the version that almost made it to air was noticeably different. Earlier cuts were a little more straightforward, more generically detective show. The signature funky, melodic guitar line that makes the theme immediately recognizable came together pretty late in the process. Post has talked about how much back and forth there was before they landed on what you actually heard every Friday night. That theme ended up winning a Grammy in 1975, by the way. Best Pop Instrumental Performance. For a TV show, that almost didn't have that riff. Let that sink in. Number 17, Garner basically rewrote his own character every season. James Garner wasn't just the lead. He was deeply involved in shaping who Jim Rockford was from year to year. He had strong opinions about what the character would and wouldn't do, and he wasn't shy about pushing back on scripts. One of his firmest rules? He didn't want some indestructible hero. He wanted a guy who, when he got punched, actually went down. Garner thought audiences were smarter than that. They didn't need a superhero. They needed someone who felt human. Writers learned pretty quickly that if they handed Garner a script where Jim was too cool or too tough, it was coming back with notes. Number 16, the show had a real mob consultant. Now, this one's never been fully confirmed in the way you'd want it to be, but the production team reportedly had access to at least one consultant with genuine organized crime connections who helped make the criminal world in the show feel grounded. Several writers and crew members over the years have alluded to it without giving specifics, which, honestly, tracks. The kind of person you'd consult for that probably wasn't someone you'd name publicly. What's clear is that the show's depiction of how corruption actually worked, how cops got bought, how cases got buried, felt unusually credible for 1970s network television. Something was informing that. Number 15. Stuart Margolin almost wasn't Angel. Angel Martin, Jim's unreliable, scheming, lovable disaster of a friend, was one of the best supporting characters on 1970s TV. And Stuart Margolin played him so well it's impossible to picture anyone else. But early casting conversations considered a completely different direction for the role. The character existed in the scripts before Margolin came in, but the tone was apparently more straight-up comedic in a broader, sillier way. Margolin brought something much more grounded to it, this sad sack authenticity that made Angel genuinely funny and genuinely pathetic at the same time. He won 2 Emmy Awards for the role, 2, for a supporting character on a detective show. Number 14, Noah Beery Jr. was specifically cast because he wasn't threatening Rocky Rockford. Jim's dad, the trucker, was played by Noah Beery Jr. And the casting choice was very intentional. The producers wanted Rocky to feel warm, non-threatening, a little square, the kind of dad who shows up with sandwiches and genuine concern. Beery Jr. had that quality in abundance. But what's interesting is that the father-son dynamic was written to be unusually functional for a TV drama. No deep trauma, no estrangement arc, no big revelation. They just liked each other. For the 1970s, that was actually kind of radical. TV dads were usually either absent or obstacles. Rocky was just there, and it worked beautifully. Number 13. The show was partially inspired by a real PI. Garner knew James Garner has talked about how some of Jim Rockford's more specific qualities, the reluctance, the financial struggle, the way he'd rather talk his way out of something than fight, were drawn from real conversations he'd had with actual private investigators over the years. One in particular, whose name never really surfaced publicly, apparently had this whole philosophy about how the job wasn't glamorous, wasn't heroic, and mostly involved chasing down insurance fraud and cheating spouses. That cynicism, that grounded, this is just a job energy, Garner absorbed it and fed it directly into the character. Rockford was realistic because he was, at least partly, real. Number 12. James Garner's stunt work nearly destroyed his knees. Garner was famously hands-on with stunts, more than the studio was ever entirely comfortable with. He did a significant amount of his own driving, his own falls, his own physical work throughout the run of the series. And it cost him. The car chase sequences alone, repeated over 6 seasons, put serious wear on his body. By the time the show ended in 1980, Garner was dealing with knee problems that would require multiple surgeries over the following years. He's spoken pretty candidly about this, that the physical demands of the show were a genuine factor in his health, declining faster than it should have for a man his age. He loved doing it, but it took a toll. Number 11. The Firebird was actually a character. The gold Pontiac Firebird Esprit is so associated with the show that Pontiac's sales for that model got a measurable bump during the run of the series. That's not legend, that's documented. The car became shorthand for a certain kind of cool, unpretentious, a little worn, fast when it needed to be. Pontiac was absolutely aware of the connection and leaned into it quietly. Multiple Firebirds were used across the production because the chase sequences and stunt work destroyed them regularly, but the look stayed consistent. Somewhere right now, there's definitely a guy restoring a gold Firebird Esprit because of this show. You know it's true. Number 10. The show had a surprisingly dark view of the police. Work drama, The Rockford Files was unusually skeptical of law enforcement. Jim's relationship with the LAPD, particularly through Dennis Becker, was complicated in a way most shows wouldn't touch. Cops in the show were frequently corrupt, lazy, or just indifferent. The system was shown as something that worked against regular people as often as it worked for them. This was airing in the wake of Watergate, post-civil rights movement, during a real cultural crisis of institutional trust, and the show absorbed all of that into its DNA. It didn't preach about it, it just showed it, which made it land harder than any speechifying would have. Number 9. Stephen J. Cannell wrote some of the best episodes as a relative unknown before Stephen J. Cannell became one of the most powerful television producers in Hollywood, before the A-Team, before 21 Jump Street, before his company's little jigsaw puzzle logo became iconic. He was a young writer cutting his teeth on the Rockford Files. Some of the sharpest, most structurally inventive episodes from the early seasons have his name on them. Cannell has credited Rockford as the place where he really learned what he could do. Roy Huggins mentored him directly. The show was basically a masterclass in TV writing during its run, and Cannell was sitting in the front row taking notes. Number 8. The show almost got canceled after season 1. NBC wasn't totally sold. The ratings in that first season were decent but not dominant, and there were real internal conversations about whether to renew. The show found its footing slowly. It took a while for audiences to settle into Garner's rhythm, to understand that the show wasn't going to give them a clean, triumphant hero every week. That comfort with ambiguity, with Jim occasionally losing or barely scraping through, that took getting used to. The renewal for season 2 was not a sure thing. And when you consider how beloved the series eventually became, how it ran 6 seasons and spawned TV movies and influenced basically every flawed detective show that came after it, yeah, that near cancellation feels like a close call for television history. Number 7, James Garner sued Universal and won. This one's significant. In 1979, after 6 seasons, Garner filed a lawsuit against Universal Studios, claiming the show had been profitable, but that the studio's accounting practices had obscured that, leaving him without the profit participation he was contractually owed. This was not a small grievance filed quietly. It was a major legal battle, and Garner won. The settlement terms were never fully disclosed, but the case became one of the more prominent examples of a performer fighting back against Hollywood's creative accounting practices. It also contributed to the strain that ended the show's original run. Garner wasn't just a great actor. He was someone who read his contracts and wasn't afraid of a fight in the courtroom either. Number 6. The show spawned 8 TV movies after it ended. When the Rockford Files ended in 1980, partly due to Garner's health, partly due to the lawsuit, partly just exhaustion, nobody fully said goodbye. Starting in 1994, Garner came back and made 8 TV movies continuing the character, all for CBS. 8. The first one, I Still Love LA, pulled enormous ratings and showed there was still a real appetite for the character. Each movie picked up with Jim's slightly older, slightly more philosophical, same trailer-ish energy. Garner did them into his late 60s. At a point in his life when most actors are coasting, he was genuinely giving Jim Rockford new dimensions. That level of commitment to a character over 2+ decades is rare. Number 5, Garner and Lou Gossett Jr. had real-life chemistry that came through on screen. Louis Gossett Jr. appeared in several episodes as Jim's friend Marcus Hayes, and the warmth between the two actors was not manufactured. Garner and Gossett had a genuine friendship off-screen, and it showed in a way that you couldn't really fake. In the 1970s, a white protagonist and a black co-lead portrayed as true equals, not as a social statement, just as two guys who respected each other, was more unusual than it should have been. The show didn't make a big deal about it, which was exactly right. It was just there. And that naturalness made it matter more than any very special episode approach would have. Number 4. The writing room had an unusually strong female voice. For a show about a male private detective in the 1970s, the Rockford Files had a notable number of female writers and writing contributors who shaped major episodes. Juanita Bartlett was one of the most prolific writers on the series and won an Emmy for her work on it. She reflects episodes in the run, stories where the human cost of crime actually registered, where victims weren't props. Bartlett's fingerprints are all over what made the show feel more layered than its premise suggested it had any right to be. She stuck with the series across most of its run, which was unusual for any writer in that era, male or female. Number 3. The show directly influenced every reluctant detective series that followed. You want a direct lineage? Magnum P.I., Remington Steele, even Monk and Psych decades later, the detective who doesn't really want to be there and is kind of a mess but somehow gets it done archetype traces directly back to Jim Rockford. Before Rockford, TV detectives were either gritty and hard-boiled or suave and infallible. Garner introduced this third thing, a guy who was genuinely competent but openly annoyed about the whole situation, who complained, who had money problems, who sometimes got the case wrong. That template got copied so many times that it became its own genre. The original is always worth knowing. Number 2, James Garner was dealing with PTSD from Korea during the show's run. This one's heavier, and it's worth treating it that way. Garner served in the Korean War and was wounded twice. He received 2 Purple Hearts. He's spoken in interviews about the psychological weight of that service, about carrying things from that period well into his adult life. Some of the world weariness that made Jim Rockford feel so real, so tired in a specific and authentic way, came from somewhere genuine. Garner wasn't performing jadedness. He'd earned a certain kind of exhaustion. Knowing that context, going back and watching his quieter scenes, the moments where Jim just seems worn down by everything, hits completely differently. Number 1, the show's finale wasn't planned. The series just stopped. There's no big send-off, no finale episode. The Rockford Files ended because Garner got seriously ill during production of season 6, a perforated ulcer among other issues, and had to step away. The show couldn't continue without him, so it stopped. The last episode to air was just a regular episode. Not a goodbye, not a conclusion, not a bow-tied ending. Just Jim Rockford going about his day, and then the credits, and then nothing. For a show that gave so much to its audience over 6 years, there's something strangely fitting about that ending being so un-Hollywood. No ceremony. Same way Jim would have wanted it, probably. Just close the file, walk to the Firebird, and drive. And that's the thing about the Rockford Files, isn't it? It never oversold itself. It never needed to. It just showed up, did the work, and left something real behind. I'd love to know which of these facts actually surprised you. Was it the Grammy? The lawsuit? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read them. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.